I'll be showing you how to create automated workflow that sends off an email at 9 a.m. every day to action owners who have actions that are 7 days past their due date. For this automation, you'll need two workflows, one that updates the date difference and one that will send off the email. For this example, I'm using these four fields. One is a date field with a date now expression. You can just copy this here. This will update the date now to be whatever the date is of the last action on this record. Then I've got a target date field, which is just a simple date field that's got no expression. A date difference field that is a number field with no expression. A owner field, which is a person field. This will be who you are sending the email to, so I've selected it to myself. A items field, so it's just simple text field, so whatever the header of this action will be. A completed field, whether this action is completed, and then two expression-based bit fields. This is also a bit field here. What this first bit field, the valid bit field, goes into is to check if this is a valid record to update the date difference on. If this has a target date in it, it becomes a valid record to update the date difference on. If it's then marked as completed, it is no longer a valid field, as you do not need to update this, as it doesn't matter, as it's now a completed action. Next is the flag field. So this is whether to flag this record up to its action owner. And this is only if the date difference is equal to 7, and the completed field is also not true. So if I select this to 7, it will then flag it, but as soon as I complete it, it will unflag it. This is to stop any unnecessary actions being run. One, you don't want a record that is marked as complete, but is still 7 days over its target date being flagged to owners. And you don't want any actions that don't have a target date being checked if they have a date difference or not. So I'll untick that, and we'll change this, and we'll get rid of this value in here. Now see, we'll now set this to also be a target date of last week, 7 days ago. So when we run these expressions, I can then show you how it works. Also, if you want to copy the expressions for these fields, they are here and they are here. Into the workflow. The first workflow you'll need is the update date difference workflow. What this does is it will schedule a job every morning at 1 a.m. So I've just started it. It's triggered it to be today. And it will then trigger this workflow 1 a.m. repeating every day. We want this to be off my user. So you want to select a user here that has access to all the records you want to be checked. So my user has access to all records in this application. If you select a user that only has access to half the records, this workflow will only action for those half of the records. One thing that's good to include is a note, what this note does. This is useful for any future app builders or any app builders you're collaborating with who will be working on this workflow in the future. So as you can see, I've put updates on all of my nodes here. Once you've set your schedule to be at 1 a.m. every morning, add in your filter, which can be dragged across here. I've set this to be if the valid field, which I explained earlier, equals true. Then you can then move on to actioning the updated field value. So this helps to cut out any records that don't need to be run. Then I've done an update field value node, which you can find here. Drag it across. I've selected the target field to be the date difference field, that number field I showed you earlier. And I've put in an expression to check the date difference between the date now field and the target date field. I pulled this straight from our support site. The way I've set it up here is that if the date now field's on the left and the target date field is on the right, it will give me a positive number. So if it's 7 days past its target date, it will come out as 7. But if I switch these round, it would come out as -7. I've also chosen to ignore access right and kept the parameter conflict behavior to be the default behavior. If you have I'd say give this a quick run through these explanations here and the different types to suit it to what you want, but this will suit it to how I wanted it to run. I've also selected to pass updated values to the following workflow actions as well. This is if I if I added any more nodes on at the end. I've also, again, given it quick notes and description, and then this workflow is done. So then you click save, and we can move on to the next workflow, which is the action past the due date workflow. This then schedules a job at 9 a.m. every morning based with my user access to then check if there are any flagged records. And for all the flagged records, it then takes the owner and sends them this email here, which is a subject of whatever the item is, whatever the action title is, and send it 7 days past due. And it also gives them a link to the record. This is, again, why these two key fields here are crucial, as this is how we're filtering the workflow. So let's give an example of this being run. One thing to always do is to test your workflow. Because this is scheduled workflow, there is an option at the bottom here to run the scheduled workflow immediately instead of having to wait for 1 a.m. the next day. This may take a few minutes while it does this. There we go. Now it's ready. If I go back to this record, yeah, you see it's updated the date difference field for me. And it's given me a date difference of 7 days, and therefore now this has been flagged. So this is now 1 a.m. and this record's been flagged. So when we go to the next workflow at 9 a.m., we can then see the flagged record will be passed through into this workflow. So we run this workflow as well. Perfect. So I've just got the email come through on my email, but this is still waiting, so it's still checking through the other records. One thing to note is that it will only send out 100 emails, so it will only be sending out emails to the first 100 records that have been flagged. And for any workflow that surpasses 30 minutes of runtime, it will then cut off after 30 minutes. So now that's finished, I can go into my emails. I can see I've now got a new email message. Show this 0 minutes ago, just now. With the ID of the record, the ID of the action, and a link to the record here, which is here. And there you go. Again, you may have to adapt this to your specific use case, but this is giving you a general overview of some important fields that you will need to run this workflow. Always make sure to test it as well.